So,
All right.
I feel like we should have some fancy intro too. So we'll just insert fancy intro from here. And to you now,
Right.
the host, the fantastic host that is Burt Reynolds.
All right. Well, welcome to our DZPD Thursday night build stream. Again, the purpose of our show, I'll remind everyone, is to take a look at builds that you can put together if you don't have hours a day to play this game. For a lot of people like ourselves, we maybe get a couple hours in a day at best, maybe not every day. And yet, I still think there's some very viable builds you can put together just farming for a couple hours a day or just playing the game. And so we're reviewing some of those builds. Tonight our topic is going to be 577 builds and how to take the 377 build that I showed last week with compensated on the ropes and spotter and turn it into a 577 build. And then we're going to talk a little bit about which of those two builds is better. It's a hot topic every week on Reddit with two camps of people arguing their side of which one of these builds is better. So we're going to look at the math behind it and talk a little bit about what is actually better. And before we do that, I think we had a question from my Mixer stream last week that has nothing to do with the game that we're going to answer. So you want to set me up with that question, Negan?
Sure. It's actually a very important question. It's critical to the survival of mankind. It was so last you had a sweater on last week, and the question simply was
Have one on tonight.
middle of June.
Yep.
One on tonight as well. It's middle of June. What the hell are you wearing sweaters for?
Yeah, that's a extremely good question, Negan.
Are you broadcasting from Alaska? Was the last part of that question. Why a sweater and are you broadcasting from Alaska?
So I'm not broadcasting from Alaska. I am broadcasting from outside of Chicago, where today it was a heat index of 104 degrees. So certainly doesn't make sense as to why I'm wearing a sweater. The short, long answer of that is about 5 years ago, God did a total miracle in my life, and I used to be addicted and drunk, and I was about 165 pounds heavier than I am today. And God rescued me, and in 9 months I lost 165 pounds by some crazy miracle, but my body still doesn't know I lost 165 pounds. So my internal thermometer does not regulate, and I'm always freezing cold. So even when my basement, which is a little chilly, is like 74 degrees, I'm freezing. And I shiver, and then my hands don't work, and then my potato aim is like 200% worse than my already bad potato aim. So in order for me to be able to actually shoot, I wear a sweater all the time. So that's the answer to that one. And
so I can't call you lizard man because you're not warm-blooded. You're cold.
I'm not cold-blooded.
What you're saying. I can't get away with calling you that.
Cold-hearted.
Right.
I've been accused of being cold-hearted.
You're cold heart.
I'm not actually cold-blooded. Yeah. So that's the reason. And so literally, if I'm just down here in like a t-shirt, after a while my hands will turn white, and then I have a really hard time shooting. And as we all know, I like to shoot a lot, so that impedes my gameplay.
I can
so
account
great
for
question.
I like to shoot a lot.
And I like clothes too. Negan can attest that I'm kind of into clothes. So yeah, I like my sweaters. Anyway, so we're gonna go into the builds now, and looking at the build we had last week. So I'm gonna throw that one on real quick. This is the 377 build we looked at last week, and it had compensated. That's really the trick to the 377. So again, the glove damage on a compensated glove, you get 15% damage when your critical hit chance is below 20% and you have 3 or less reds, right? So that was the key to this whole build last week. One thing I didn't call out last week, which I should have called out and want to call out, is you cannot really run a compensated build with an SMG. Because if you put even one critical hit chance mod on your SMG, you'll go over that 20%. And I made that stupid mistake at one point because the original spotter mask I had happened to be Sokolov, and so I think I still have it. I think it's in here. Yep, this guy. And so I was like, oh, well, naturally I better run an SMG. And then I was realizing, like, anytime I had the SMG on, I wasn't getting any different damage than when I didn't have the gloves on. And so I was like, well, there's something up with that. And that's the 20% crit chance. You don't want to go over it. So there's that. So what I wanted to talk about tonight, Negan, was how do you turn this into a 5.7.7 build? Because one of the other big meta builds is 5.7.7 with spotter and on the ropes. And
Like you said,
so I did that
it's
this
also,
week.
It's also a big discussion on Reddit. It's constantly going back and forth, so we thought we'd take a look at it just to see what the math tells us
Yep.
as far as these builds go.
Yeah, yep. And so I didn't have to change a lot of pieces out. And so I'm going to show you that. I mean, you can see there's some differences here. Actually, my 3.7.7 is actually a 3.8.7. And there's a reason for that, which has to do with the backpack head. When you don't have any reds on the backpack in the 3.7.7, you can end up with more blues. On this one, though, you'll see 4 pieces changed there. So when I switch loadouts, there's 4 pieces that are different. And they don't, one of them's inherently natural, the gloves. So I think I'll start there, Negan, with the gloves and why they changed. Obviously can't run compensated because I'm going to have 5 reds. So I no longer meet those criteria. So here, I think the best glove talent to swap for is Devastating, which again gives you 5% flat weapon damage. I managed to have a same pair of gloves, so Gila Guard, which again I'm running because the utility mod slot, so I can pick up 1 extra yellow here. And yeah, so I mean, that one's kind of self-explanatory. I can't run compensated, so I have to run something else. Devastating makes the most sense. Get that extra damage in, and that's what I'm running. The holster. I had to change the holster. In the old build, I had a Fenris holster with Devastating on it. It had a blue and a yellow. In this build, I have a Fenris holster, and it has a yellow and Devastating. Again, the reason for that is the backpack I'm running this week is a little different than the backpack I was running last week. They're similar, but they're not the same. And I needed 1 more yellow in order to meet my criteria of 7. And you can see, unfortunately, on this is a piece I'm looking for an upgrade on. I had to roll Devastating onto this holster, which means I could not maximize any of the stats on it. I would have much preferred to have gotten one with a natural Devastating roll on it. You can see here on last week's holster, I had Devastating on it, and so I was able to roll the skill power, maximize it. Here I could not. So
take a step back for just a sec. So when you do 5.7.7 as opposed to 3.7.7, you keep talking about skill power and stuff like that. Why is any skill power or anything like that important as far as the build goes? Are you going to put certain skills together that help it out, or what do you do? Skills?
Yeah, I mean, technically it doesn't really matter. In the way I'm running this build, it really probably doesn't matter that much. Because ultimately I'm just using skill cooldowns to push my damage capacity up. Okay. But because in a group play scenario, I do have spotter on my mask, which pushes the whole group's damage up, I would like my pulse to come back relatively quickly. So if I have high enough skill power that I can unlock some mods, I can put some cooldown reduction on that pulse and get it back faster. I guess the same goes for the heal. Theoretically, I'm running a heal here. It's nice to have a stronger heal. Or if I'm running the fire starter chem launcher like I ran last week, it's nice to have more shots in the canister. But from a damage perspective, it's actually better when my skills are on cooldown than when they're up. And so I could, if I wanted to, not even think about it, I could put cooldown reduction everywhere. That's the other thing I could theoretically do. Instead of using mods, I could have all my golds rolled to cooldown reduction. The problem with that is that a lot of this is going to be, a lot of these are going to be on mods, right? And so there aren't, like if you look, a lot of my golds are actually coming from mod slots, and mod slots don't have cooldown reduction. I don't know why they haven't made gold mods with cooldown reduction on them, but they currently don't. I think we'll see what happens, and for those of you who weren't able to catch a state of game this week, skill builds and skills are getting a full overhaul in TU Title Update 5. Maybe, and they're switching cooldown reduction to skill haste, which those of you who played Division 1 are probably familiar with skill haste. Maybe they'll add some skill haste mods. I think that would be pretty cool. But yeah, that's the reason for caring at all about skill power Negan is I wouldn't mind having more of it so I can get my skills like pulse back faster.
Makes total sense.
Yeah. And again, you know, in the world of min-maxing, you never really want to have to roll the talent on the piece if you can. But again, these builds are very realistic, right? Like, I can't farm all day, so this is what I got. This is what I made work, and it actually, you'll see it performs fine. The chess piece I'm running is the exact chess piece I ran last week, and the mask I'm running is the mask I was running last week. However, since last week, I did get this piece, which is a Gila Guard mask, which I'm actually going to put on instead of the one I was running last week. Now, there's a variety of reasons for that. Number one, here, by having a second Wyvern piece, all I was getting was 15% drone skill power. Now, I'm not running a drone, so I don't need drone skill power. In the build we had last week, I only had one piece of Wyvern on, so I was getting critical hit damage off of it, and I was happy with that. But in this particular build, because I have Wyvern knees on, which we'll talk about in a minute, it makes more sense to run this because the third piece of this actually gives me 15% more pulse skill power, which in this particular build is actually very valuable. And so that's the mask I'm actually going to run on this week, but I don't have to, and I could totally do it without. The backpack, and this is going to get a little discussion about RNG here, random number generation.
Our favorite part of the whole thing, RNG.
RNG. So the backpack I'm running here is exactly the same backpack as I'm running here, except for the rolls on it are just slightly different. So you can see on the ropes and hardened, on the ropes and hardened. And this one has a utility mod slot and a defensive mod slot. And this one has a utility mod slot and a defensive mod slot. And this one has health and armor. And this one has health and armor. Better rolls, I'd add. And a way better armor roll. However, this one has weapon damage on it. So, when I have 3 reds, we discussed last week, I'm going to run chest damage, I'm going to run damage to elites on my mask, and I'm going to run specific weapon damage on my gloves. When I go to 5, I'm going to want to pull in that flat weapon damage on a backpack. Now, the RNG component of this is there are a couple locations in this game. One of them is an underground that's just north of DZ South. And one of them is an underground that's over by Lincoln Memorial, where I go to farm keys, where there are some spots where there are 2 loot crates right next to each other, literally a couple feet apart. And I believe, can't prove it, but I believe contextually that the RNG in this game must be based off of time seeds related to day of the week, hour, minute, second, whatever. Because I pulled these 2 backpacks out of 2 of those crates, one right after the other. And that's happened more than once for me, where I've literally pulled the same piece with slightly different rolls out of 2 of those crates right next to each other. I would say it happens rather frequently. So that's how I got this other backpack. I got it on the same farming
So you
run.
you could just be getting lucky in every time, but it does raise a suspicion. And in Div 1, wasn't there a time and frame where the people were actually proving that when you opened up a cache, that they were able to show different people in the group were getting the exact same chest or same chest piece, were getting a
Yeah.
chest piece. So it's very possible.
I would say it's pretty likely. I mean, again, it doesn't happen every time, but I would say 60 to 70% of the time it happens, which is a lot. And so these two backpacks mirror each other, which made it perfect for doing this build video, because again, it's very, very similar. And it had just the right rolls, so there it is. So weapon damage. And I've got 9%. That's a high average roll for weapon damage. But when we talk about the math in a little bit, it'll matter. And finally, the other piece that I swapped out here is I swapped in Wyvern pads. So you may remember from last week, I was running these Fenris knee pads because they have a yellow. They have patience, which I love, and hard hitting. I miss my patience. But in this particular case, I desperately wanted to have another red, and needing to have that other red when you figure calculating out, what are my best 5 talents. So when I'm putting this build together, and just so all of you, kind of understand how I'm doing my math here, as I'm putting together the build and I'm looking at where can I get raw damage. There's only a handful of places, right? So we talked about this last week. We talked about you can get it on your chest, you can get it on your backpack, you can get specific weapon damage on your gloves. And then really that's, those are the main sources of it, right? And then you're going to start having conditional damage. Like I could get crit chance, which I would want on my holster. Or I could have crit chance on my knees. Or I could get crit damage. But I'm not going to benefit from that all the time. And so as I need a 5th spot to pick it up, the best spot to get that is a mod slot. And the mod slot was available on this one. This is great because the change that they made in TU4 used to be Wyvern knee pads could only put a protocol slot in, which meant you had a protocol mod, which you'd get a little bit of damage, and then you'd get some conditional damage on it, like crit chance. But now I can put a system mod in, and so you can see here I'm picking up 5% additional assault rifle damage, 2% LMG damage, and 1.5% flat weapon damage. And so that's going to be
pretty good
extremely
roll for a mod, by the way.
Yeah,
that's a decent.
That's a decent
like
mod.
6.5% of the AR. So
Mm-hmm.
keep that in mind.
Yeah, so I'm going to be able to really push that damage up beyond what would be normal. So when we looked at which one of these is better, right? The 5.77 or the 3.77 from a math standpoint. Remember last week we had 13.5 weapon damage on the chest, and we had 37 because it's the same. I made sure these two masks had the exact same DTE roll on them. Right, 37% damage to elites last week, and then the AR damage we were getting, I think 9%, it's equal 9% AR damage last week, and then a plus 15 from the compensated. Now this week we're losing that 15. However, we are picking up 9, right? In the backpack here. We're picking up, as you just pointed out, Negan, 6.5 down here. But we're also picking back up 5 here because of devastating on these gloves. So we actually only really lost 10 going from compensated to devastating. So here we got 26% more damage on the assault rifle.
And
a
remind,
grand total
compensated
then of
is
16% more.
Compensated is a conditional talent?
It's conditional to the fact that you have 3 or less reds. Oop, did you leave me, Negan?
Yeah, I just got to say I haven't moved around enough. We're good. I'll be back in a second.
Okay. It is 15% if you have 3 or less reds, or have 20% or less crit chance. So it's conditional on those two things, right? So those two aspects make it conditional. And so, again, most of the time if you're running an assault rifle, you're not going to have more than 20% crit chance, right? And so that's not really an issue. But if you were to throw on an SMG that had a couple crit chance mods on it, you would not get the 15%. And the second you have 4 reds, you're not going to get that 15%. So that is true. You know, like this allows me to run anything I want, 5.77. And in this particular build, I'm getting 16% more damage than I would last week. Now, the one thing I will say about it is, obviously with the 3.77, you have less places you are maximizing your stat rolls for damage. So if we look at last week's backpack, well, this is that garbage backpack. I had rolled hard and done it. If I had had this, my druthers about me when I'd gotten this backpack, I would have rolled the cooldown reduction for skill power here. Or I would have rolled a ridiculous health roll on it, or a massive armor roll on it. Here, I had to roll the weapon damage, right? I had no choice. That had to be rolled. I think it originally had crit chance on it. So, you know, you're a little bit more limited in how much of a skill build you can put together in a 5.77. So in a 3.77, I think you can really maximize the skill build aspect of this build. But if you want to push damage, 5.77's definitely the way to go. Yeah, I think that's about it. Questions on that one, Negan? On all of that?
Oh, I think you hit it. I think, like you were saying, the compensated is conditional, so actually giving it up for this particular build where you have all around damages.
Yeah. This is not going to be conditional at all. The one aspect of this that is going to be conditional, though, right, is that obviously just like last week's spotter and on the ropes are, you know, they're not up 100% of the time, right? Well, if you play it right, they are. But just to remind you what we're getting off of those, spotter is 20% damage buff to pulsed enemies. So any enemies that your pulse hits, you get it, your group gets it. And on the ropes is 25% flat damage bonus when all skills are on cooldown. I am going to show you my stat sheet because this is kind of the cool thing about this build, right? When we talk about what we're looking for from a damage perspective, I'm getting 34% all weapon damage plus 39% assault rifle damage. And then I'm getting 52% damage to elites. So that's not fantastic, 52% damage to elites. But obviously, whenever On the Ropes is up, I'm getting an additional 25% all weapon damage, which is a lot. The other thing I will tell you is that when I run this build solo, this is not the mask I run when I run it solo. So when I'm running solo, I run this. Because I don't care about spotter when I'm by myself. It's actually a downgrade for me, right? Because On the Ropes is giving me 25% damage. Spotter is only giving me 20. So when I run this build solo, I don't run a pulse. I run Pokeballs, cluster mines, and I run another 10% DTE up top. And that way I can not have to worry about going back and forth between the 20 and 25. And that extra DTE comes in handy if you're doing like challenging missions or whatever. So then I'm really only running On the Ropes. But because we usually play in group play, I run spotter on it the vast majority of the time. All good? Want to go?
So, yeah.
I know where a bounty is this week, Negan. I'm not. I memorized where I put my bounty.
So before you go out there, so we talked about you did a compensated build before where you're up close, relatively close and 7.7, a little further back. 5.77. I did.
So Negan, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you.
Right, how about now?
All right. Shoot again.
I
What
was
were you
asking
saying?
about your general strategy when you're running the 5.7.7, because you had compensated. We talked about a couple weeks ago. You did a little up and close reversal, and then you, for the 3.7.7, you weren't as close. So what's your strategy around the 5.7.7 as you're playing? Say group play.
I'm gonna
So
play
that's
it
what
just
you're doing
like
right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna play it just like I played that 3.7.7. I'm gonna hang back a little bit. I'm running literally the exact same guns I was running on the other build. I think maybe. Just slightly different. Very similar. And oh look, our friend Horchata joined us for a bounty. So that'll be fun.
Nice.
I'm running very similar. Very very similar. LMG assault rifle. I didn't cover this. So again, I think we covered it last week, but Optimist, Optimist is going to be your friend because it's 5 or less reds as well. And you get 3% damage for a 10% ammo missing. By the end of a magazine, you're dealing 30% more damage. And then I'm not running Optimist on my LMG. Instead, I'm running Unhinged, which is 20% weapon damage at the cost of 25% weapon handling. And I'm setting you up right there for a question, Negan, which I think you could ask, which is...
The weapon handling, what's the advantage of it? Why not Optimist?
Why not Optimist on the
not
LMG? Because the LMG is I'm going to use for sustained damage. Optimist is... If Unhinged was available on an assault rifle, I would be running Unhinged on an assault rifle. It's only available on LMGs. And I think it is the biggest upside damage talent in the game with the lowest downside. But it's only on one gun type. So on an assault rifle, we talked the first week about Ranger, which is going to give you weapon damage based on how far you are from targets. You could run Strained, which is going to give you crit damage as your health depletes, as you're getting into... the lower parts of your armor bar, and once you get into your health bar. But I don't have any crit chance. I got none. So from a damage talent standpoint, really my only option here is going to be Optimist. And it's actually some would argue, potentially the best damage talent for an assault rifle in the game. Because obviously the end of your magazine, you are dealing a lot more damage than you were. And 30% damage is not a small amount, right? So as we stack all these things up, as I'm getting to the end of a magazine on the assault rifle, and I've got on the ropes up, you're talking 55% additional damage, which of course is a lot. And then you add Unstoppable Force onto that, which of course is what's on my chest, which, here I've got 200, and you'll see I'm right at a 25,000 marker, right? So I'm getting, what is it? 2% weapon damage for every 25,000 max armor. So, I suck at math. 16 plus 6. I'm getting 22% damage after each kill. So, again, some significant extra damage there. Potentially I'm pushing out, 75% additional damage at the end of a magazine when all those conditions are going. So, that's some pretty cool stuff, and I think it's time to go see how it plays. What do you think? I'm guessing.
Let's see how it plays.
All right, I'm guessing Horchata's probably going to want to... He's probably tired of waiting
He
for
better
us.
Most likely. Let's get him out there.
So
Let's
we'll
let him
go
shoot stuff.
We'll go do this. We'll go do this challenging bounty. Temple Catfish. For those of you, if you can see, I have a ton of bounties. Those are all mostly just coming off the snitch. So yeah, I save them up for our stream.
Just for us to run. You're so nice.
There you go. Yep, Horchata did my math for me. 22% weapon damage on kill for 10 seconds. Add that to the 25 from on the ropes, the 30 from Optimist. You're getting a lot of damage. That's no small thing. That's why this kind of build plays well. let's dance horchata in here. I'm sure he'll enjoy that. Since he hasn't quite made it over here yet.
I left the room. He takes too long. I can't wait for him.
I'll be waiting for him, doing my little house dance. There we go.
There you go. Show him some love. There you go.
Location guarded by hostiles.
Ah, this is my favorite bounty location. We never do this one.
Nope. Brand new location.
Yeah.
Whereas I still run
Nothing
around
ever goes
all
wrong
over
here.
town.
Nothing.
Yeah. Let's
This
see
place
if we
is
can do it
great.
first time
It's
out.
great all the time.
Well, the good news, I'm gonna let you show off your skills, so I really can't, can't blame me when this goes south.
Well, I got my monster heels going.
Oh.
So, I like your
Holy
like the
pa-
arm
oh,
up there.
There we go. All right, let's do this.
All right, so whole group's getting a 20% buff there while these enemies are pulsed. There's a potato aim. Yes, I don't know if anyone can, if you could see the damage numbers on my screen, what this is hitting for, but it is, on those elites, man, it's laying out some significant damage.
Get up close and personal. Show them how it's done right there.
90,000, 100,000, 70,000 on regular hits. Oof, there are people up here.
Yep.
That's not
Oh,
gonna
and
be
I just froze. I
Forgot.
just froze.
Yeah, I'm a little.
Agent down.
All right. Fast travel back
So
to
somebody
Horchata.
staying. Somebody
Yeah,
staying
I'll
up.
stay. I'll stay there.
Okay.
See? Real live casual core. Not hardcore 12 hours a day BS. Did Horchata
Yep.
go down too? Or you gotta run back.
Running back. Yeah, so actually though, this is a good opportunity to talk about a little trick that if you have a bounty and you all go down like that,
Hostiles guarding location nearby.
just leave somebody on the ground dead and they can hold the bounty open while you run out and go get it. That way you don't lose it. Otherwise you will probably lose the bounty. And you'll have to restart at some other location. Now the nice thing is you can just restart at some other location, but
Right. And also that pointed out the fact that you're not really a face tanking build in a group of bad guys.
I'm not, and I forgot. I'm so used to doing hard bounties at this location where only one wave of guys comes. I totally forgot that I was going to get a second spawn of guys, and should not have run up there like that. I'm not built for that. I didn't have a heal up at the time, so that was a stupid move on my part, and shame on me.
You're
That
there.
said-
So I'm leaving, I'm coming back.
Got to show you something, kind of cool. Got to show you that suck at this sometimes.
Oh, we're real players. We're real players.
Okay, so you can see there I'm getting really lit up because I'm solo in here, but
Yeah, I'll be there in just a second as well. I think Horchata just jumped in on you. There you go. You got backup.
that is up top there is a sniper turret. That's a very bad thing. I don't want that. Another turret up. Here comes the 20% damage buff for everybody.
And anybody who watches this stream long enough and sees us playing enough of these, Burt is not a fan of turrets.
I do
It's-
not
it-
like
you know what?
turrets. They are.
He almost takes it personal
They are-
when they get up.
I actually do take it. I take it very personal, Negan.
It's an affront to your sensibilities. Come on, purple, put up your head.
Drone guy up there. So this is the one thing about this build, right? Is you constantly, you have to get a little used to it because you have to constantly be monitoring your skills. Recognizing, of course, that you want them always on cooldown means you can't just sit there and not deal with them. They're constantly something you have to be paying attention to. For some people, that's an unpleasant experience, and so some people don't love that. You get used to it.
Well, that's also why a lot of people, when you like that, they don't like on the ropes because there is so much you're already trying to do. I'll get porch out of it in a sec. But you're already trying to keep track of your skills is a little different.
It's a management thing, right? Like you have to constantly be managing skills, and so you can't just ignore it. You frequently, if you're not careful, will find that you have not managed your skills, and that stuff's not on cooldown anymore, and all of a sudden you're looking and you're like, how come I'm only doing 40,000 damage when I was doing 70? And the answer's simple. Your skills are not on cooldown, and you're not paying attention to it. So, it is just something to think about. And I think, one of these weeks, next week maybe, we'll cover a raid build. At some point, what I would call a raid build, and you'll see, they don't require any management, and so there's, you're pushing a lot of damage and you don't have to manage skills. But I find this fun and entertaining, and so I kind of dig it.
Oh, and you also mentioned running the skills, having them be on cooldown all the time is having a good heal. Also, you're not supposed to face tank. At least it gives you some survivability as you're running around killing things as well. Have it with you.
Yeah, this very much favors my playstyle. And, again, depending on how you want to run it, you can provide a lot of good CC for a group. And to be clear, it's not like you couldn't run this in the raid. You absolutely, I believe, can. But not unless you're really good at managing your skills. And so you need to be in a situation where you're the kind of person who, knows how to manage said skills and keep them on cooldown.
Why did I get a better fucking gun?
I just put down a car. Bye, lady. As I said, I'm letting you do all the work over there. Showing off your skills and your ability to shoot things.
Immediate medical assistance needed.
And this horchata. Face tanking.
Cleaning up the streets one bad
Alright.
guy at a time. Nicely done.
All right. Good
So I know we
stuff
talked
right
about it
there.
relatively quickly. Again, talk about your strategy when you went in there and doing that. Not face tanking. That was the first thing you learned. But again, it was your skill cooldowns.
Hanging
So you
back
want-
a little bit.
You want your skills on cooldown,
hitting
so you
my-
have skills that go down or come up pretty quickly, and then stay on cooldown for a little while, which is kind of nice.
Yep. And I'm basically I'm basically hitting my pulse first. Man, I got some really garbage rolls on those guns. Yeah, I'm hitting my pulse first. I'm letting that run down a little tiny bit. Getting every bit of ounce of benefit out of the pulse for you guys and for myself. And then right when the pulse is about to expire, I drop a heal. Beautiful thing is TU4 brought us back the single tap heal. Love it. Look at that. One tap.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. I'm literally one tapping. That's great. So yeah, dropping a heal. Once the pulse is out, the pulse doesn't go on cooldown till after all of however many second duration the pulse has that mine has. I have a duration mod on it, so I'm getting a little better than normal duration out of it. Okay, now it's on cooldown. So now on the ropes is going to kick in as soon as I drop that heal. And the nice thing is they give you a little icon that comes up, shows on the ropes is up. And again, one thing to consider when you're picking skills to run with one of these on the ropes build is you want skills that go on cooldown like right away. So spotter doesn't, but pulse enemies only stay pulse for 20 seconds or whatever, and I'm getting extra damage because of spotter during that. If I took my spotter mask off, and I put my damage to elites mask on instead, right? So let's say I'm gonna go play solo. Negan's busy, Horchata's busy, so I'm gonna have to go play by myself. I'm actually gonna throw this mask on. Now I'm not actually gonna want the pulse. I know, it's sad. It's a night when all you guys aren't hanging out, or because I got on before all you West Coasters were on.
Yeah.
Or Ghost, yeah. I would not want to run this pulse though, right? Like, I'm gonna run a Seeker Mine because the pulse is not gonna go on cooldown for. That's 10-second duration, so it won't go on cooldown for 10 seconds. Seeker Mines go on cooldown right away, the second you drop them. And
nice.
The Chem Launcher goes on cooldown right away. So anything that goes on cooldown right away is what you're going to want to run with if you're running like a hard-hitting mask. And if you're running spotter, then you run the pulse. So those are how we pick our skills. Don't ever run a turret with on the ropes. The turret or the drone are like never on cooldown. So we don't want to run that. And instead we'd run this. So yeah, I think that's about it. Do you have anything else you want to ask, Negan?
Nope, I'm good. I think you answered all the questions I could think of. As I said, as we started this, why you're wearing sweaters, that was the important one. And then whether the 5.77 versus the 3.77 worked out better for you. And as we talked about, the 5.77
Yeah.
in this case too.
Yeah, and to recap that, if you're looking to push
There you
damage
go.
output, the 5.77 wins. So there's that. If you're looking to push some skill power, the 3.77 wins. Not remarkably different, but 16% damage is 16% damage, and so if I'm looking to push damage, I'm going to run the 5.77. And
Right.
yeah. So if
Yeah.
we had a really catchy sign off,
That's right. Be like Negan and
We would
Burt,
use that
insert
now.
catchy sign off here for now.
yeah, but I just want to again thank the Golden Voice Gaming Negan for co-hosting, and we'll catch you next week. We'll cover another build, and maybe actually I was thinking next week, Negan, maybe we could like show the start of a farming route. Maybe
Ooh,
we could do
there we
the
go.
upper left quadrant of the map and look at farming routes. So yeah, tune in for that next week, and we'll see y'all later. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See ya. And thanks for jumping in.